Hi friends, glad to be back today. And today we're going to be talking about signs and symptoms of BPD, specifically the impulsive and risky behavior part, and really focusing on the concept of ending positive relationships and how someone with BPD tendencies has tendencies of ending positive and healthy relationships in their lives. And we're going to understand really why that is and really dig deep into that concept. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. And if you end up liking this video and it helps you, give us a like here. So let's deep dive into that and really understand why is that? Why would somebody with BPD tendencies have a tendency of ending positive relationships in their life? The first reason why this happens is the black and white thinking. We all understand black and white thinking and what that means. There's no gray area. We have extreme thoughts about a situation. And in this situation, we have extreme thoughts about an individual. Now, many people with signs and symptoms of BPD jump into relationships pretty quickly, and they don't realize it, but they have a cycle pattern of putting that person on the pedestal, right? And so the person gets on this pedestal. They don't even realize they're on it, but they are the favorite person of the person that has BPD signs and symptoms because this person can see no wrong, no fault, no problems with this person. This person is perfect. And as we know, none of us can be perfect. And unfortunately, eventually something's going to happen where the other person's going to do something that the person that has BPD signs and symptoms is going to devalue them by. And they're going to see them as being all bad. And so this happens oftentimes. So it's kind of up and down, pedestal to devaluation, back on the pedestal, back devalued. And the other person really doesn't have an idea what's going on. They don't really understand it. They just want to feel better and get back on the pedestal. So honestly, there's just no gray area in seeing that person as far as seeing all the good things and maybe some of the not so good things, but being able to see them as an entire person. The interesting part about this situation is that the other person doesn't understand that pedestal. Like I'm saying, they don't really realize they're on a pedestal. They just think that they're being treated the best they've ever been treated. This person actually sees them for their value. And so in that situation, the other person doesn't understand what's actually taking place. And so when the person that has the BPD tendencies pulls the person off the pedestal and begins to devalue them, the other person doesn't know what's going on. They have no idea what's happening. All they know is that this doesn't feel good. All they know is they don't like being in this position. They don't like what's happening to them. They don't like the communication that's probably not very good. They might not like the anger that's being presented to them. And they certainly don't like the way that they're being treated. And so they work really hard to get back into the good graces of the person that's showing the signs and symptoms of BPD. Now, the good graces to you and I could be good graces to one person, but pedestal to others, right? So it's the same thing. The other person just doesn't understand that there's actually a pedestal there. So the process is the person is working to get back in the good graces, not knowing that there's a pedestal, and eventually that other person doesn't understand why there's turmoil, why there's all these issues, why the blender of emotion that's causing these problems. See, because the other person is frustrated because they don't understand what they're dealing with. All they know is everything was great, everything was wonderful, this person was treating them so well, and now they're not. And so the person that's not being treated well doesn't know what's going on and trying to fulfill obligations, trying to do whatever they think is the right thing. But in the process, they are beginning to question their own reality. They're questioning themselves, their own value. They're getting down on themselves. And so this is also causing massive turmoil in the relationship that's ultimately going to cause a problem because they don't understand. They're just reacting to the situation at hand. Eventually, the person doesn't understand what's happening, the turmoil, they don't understand the situation, but they do know that they're in a blender of emotions. And I've realized that someone will stay in this type of relationship with someone with the BPD tendencies as long as their issues will allow them to stay. And what I mean by that is if we have extreme codependency, if we have self-esteem issues, self-worth issues, we're going to stay in this relationship. Why? Because we're going to make it work. We want to make it work because the working of that relationship somehow or not directly correlates with our value. If we can't make this relationship work, we're a problem. If we can't make this relationship work, we're no good. We have no value. Also, from a codependent standpoint, when somebody is codependent, they believe that the more things they do for that person, the more the person's going to love them. They feel like they have to do things. I got to take them there, buy them this, show up for that, do this, do that. And they think that's going to change things, but they've learned that from the growing up process, even though that's not really the situation here. And so they internalize the situation. They fight themselves trying to figure out what they can do next to make things better. And so the longer they're on that thought process, the longer they're going to stick in the relationship. Now, in this process, to get back on the elusive pedestal that most people don't even know exists in the relationship, they just think it's getting along and having this great connection. In that process, eventually the person that has the BPD signs and symptoms will eventually push and push and push the other person, eventually devaluing them to the point of no return. So eventually that person can do no right. There's nothing right that they can do. They're constantly being marked as being negative, being a problematic situation. They're constantly being told what their choices are not good. They're constantly being ridiculed, questioned. And so that becomes the new way of life in that relationship. And that's a really hard place to be when nothing you do is right. And eventually that's where most people hit a wall. They're trying, nothing's changing. They can't seem to get this person to love them the way that they were loved in the beginning. They don't seem to get that positive feedback or that connection that they had in the beginning, not realizing, the proverbial hidden pedestal. And so eventually they just start getting kind of angry and upset. They turn inside of themselves finding anger because they don't know how to make the situation right. So in the process, see, both people are kind of fighting internally, but also externally. And then eventually the other person is holding on by a thread. The other person is holding on by a thread, and eventually in order to save themselves, they actually have to end the relationship or they have to let go. And that's really super critical and painful. But remember, the person that had the signs and symptoms of BPD has pushed this person over the edge to the point where there's nothing left. This person literally feels like they have no identity. They've given all they can. They've given every bit of themselves. They don't have any boundaries. They've allowed all their values to be walked over just to try to save this relationship. So eventually, in order to save oneself, even though they might be in pieces and parts at that point in time, they have to exit stage right. And that can be very challenging because when they're trying to leave, they're going to ignite the fears of the person that has BPD signs and symptoms because of their fear of abandonment. And then this is when the dance begins, where the other person is scared of being abandoned or left alone. And so even though they've devalued this person over and over and over again, almost to the point of no return, now they're racing back toward this person to keep them back in their life. And so then this is when this person begins to think, okay, well, maybe they've realized my value. Maybe they see who I am, but they don't realize that the fear of abandonment actually trumps all feelings they actually have over this person. And I hate to say that because that can be painful to hear. The fact that the person is actually so fearful of abandonment that they'll get back in a relationship with somebody that they actually don't even respect. And so eventually the person has to save themselves. And so they have to exit. They have to leave the relationship, which is very challenging for the other person. They don't want to leave the relationship because this relationship is like no other relationship that they've had. They've experienced the extreme highs and the extreme lows. And so in the process too, they realize that they've lost most of their identity because they sacrifice their values. They sacrifice a lot of things that meant something to them because they were trying to make the other person happy. Because remember, they didn't understand what was going on in the beginning. They didn't understand that they were on the pedestal. Now, the person that has BPD signs and symptoms doesn't even realize there's a cycle pattern of putting somebody on the pedestal. They don't even see that they do that. They're not self-aware to realize that they're doing that. And they don't realize the devaluation part. They just think somebody did something wrong. They don't also realize the black and white thinking. Remember, these things are not seen. It's not like they're, oh, I'm black and white thinking. I'm putting somebody on a pedestal here. So that's the situation. Now, when the other person leaves, it ignites the fear of abandonment within the person that has BPD signs and symptoms. So then what happens? They're going to race back to this person. They're going to try to get this person to take them back. They're going to try to get back in the relationship again. Doing exactly what this person wanted, which is, oh my God, they've come back to me. They've realized my value. They've seen that I'm me and I'm good and that they want me back. Okay, but that's not really it either. Unfortunately, I hate to say that. The real issue is that their fear of abandonment is trumping anything. They don't want to be alone, so they're going to bring them back in under the guise of them actually thinking that they have this relationship. Because remember, both people believe it. The person with BPD signs and symptoms believe that they're losing the love of their life. The person that had to step out because to find their own identity is now like, oh wait, now they've realized my value. Let me try to jump back in and do this and save this relationship. Because remember, in their mind, this relationship is so important to their own value. So both people have these situations at odds, but the interesting part about it is the actual issue is the big deal about abandonment, okay? So the person with BPD signs and symptoms does not want to have abandonment, does not want to be alone, but what are they doing? They're actually facilitating and creating the actual way to be abandoned, to be alone. because of the way that they are projecting on other people, projecting issues, the lack of self-awareness, and the personal patterns, the pedestal, the favorite person, the devaluation, the discard, going into the relationship so quickly, too quickly, not taking time, and seeing that person is perfect in the very beginning. And so these are the factors that lead to that impulsive and risky behavior of ending positive relationships. And see, it takes two to tango. But the real reason that's very interesting behind the whole aspect is that the one thing that they don't want is the one thing that's created. And that's that subconscious situation. I don't want to be abandoned. I don't want to be left alone, but yet I'm going to do all these things and create this reality in this relationship, and I'm not even going to see it until I'm at the point where the other person's at the breaking point and has to leave just to try to figure out their own identity because they've lost it in this relationship. And I know that's a deep dive into it, but I don't think a lot of people go deep enough into explaining that, because you can just say they end positive relationships. Well, that's true, but why is that true? How does that happen? What's the reasoning behind it? The pathology. I mean, the cycles, the patterns. These are the things that you have to really understand, because if you understand this, if you're in a relationship with someone with BPD and you're feeling this, you understand it. If you have signs and symptoms of BPD and you're wondering, why do my relationships keep not working? Why is this happening? At least it gives you a blueprint to say, okay, wait a second. That is true. I do have a tendency of putting somebody on a pedestal, I guess, and I do have a tendency of seeing things black and white, and I don't see that gray area. Or the flip side, if you're somebody that might have codependent tendencies, I realize that I try to maintain relationships because those relationships are about my value, and that's not the case. Our relationships, our external relationships, don't dictate our personal value. But again, remember, that's part of the codependent mantra, is you believe that, and that's why you work so hard to keep them, because you feel like if you don't have it, you have a depreciated value. I hope this video has enlightened or inspired you to some degree. Please give us a like on this video if it's helped you. In the comments section, let me know, have you been on either side of this? Have you been the one putting someone on a pedestal, or have you been the one that's been on the pedestal and thrown off? It's very interesting to see, because a lot of times we don't recognize the dynamic and we don't really understand what's really truly happening until we really step back and analyze the situation. In the meantime, don't forget to live your true life.